Welcome to the third of NSAI's Knowledge Transfer series of webinars. This is the third in a series of 4 online presentations on CE marking and placing products on the EU market. My name is Mary White and I am head of NSAI's Brexit unit. We have previously looked at CE marking and the role of economic operators. Today I will look at legislation covering different products and how it is tailored to each product type. The last talk will cover how Brexit will impact on CE marking and what you can do to protect your business. Within the EU, there are 2 types of legislation: directives such as the Low Voltage Directive and regulations, and a good example of this is the Construction Products Regulation. The current legal basis for both regulations and directives is the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. This is the Lisbon Treaty. Article 288 of the treaty makes provision for the different types of EU legislation, including regulations and directives. Regulations are EU legal acts that come into force automatically on a particular date, either a date set in the regulation or the date that is published in the official journal of the EU. They don't need to be transposed into national law by any member state. They are binding in their entirety on all member states. There are no derogations. Directives are legal acts of the European Union which require member states to achieve a particular result without dictating the means of achieving that result. It can be distinguished from regulations, which are self-executing and do not require any implementing measures. Member states must transpose it into national law or regulation which achieves the result set out in the directive by a certain date. Member states who do not do so can be the subject of infringement proceedings and may ultimately be subject to penalties. Directives acknowledge that member states have different legal systems, processes and traditions, and allows countries to apply the directive in a manner that is compatible with these. There is very little difference between regulations and directives for manufacturers seeking to CE mark their products. There are 32 different pieces of EU legislation covering manufactured products currently in force. 10 of these are regulations, 22 are directives. I will elaborate on those highlighted today to illustrate that while there is a single overarching system, each piece of legislation has its own little quirks, which helps tailor it to the product it regulates. Here is a brief summary of the 6 steps to CE marking products, which we covered in the first presentation of this series. And here is a brief roadmap of how the system works. The EU drafts the directive or regulation which sets out the basic requirements which must be met to place the product on the EU market. Then, number 2, you show that your product meets the requirements of the regulation by showing that it meets the standards associated with the regulation. Step number 3, for some products you are required to use an independent notified body to assess conformity of your products. Then, finally, you make the declaration of conformity, that the product meets the requirements of the regulation, and then the CE mark can be applied to the product. In terms of market surveillance, you must check that products placed on the market meet the requirements of the regulation. We shall now look at electrical and electronic devices. These are covered by 3 directives. They are the Low Voltage Directive, relating to electrical equipment designed for use within certain voltage limits. The Electromagnetic Compatibility Directive, known as the EMC Directive, and the Radio Equipment Directive, otherwise known as the RED Directive. The first thing to note is that the essential characteristics have different aims for the 3 different directives. In terms of the Low Voltage Directive, it is about public safety by preventing injury to people or damage to property or equipment. The EMC Directive is more concerned with protecting the electromagnetic environment in which the equipment works by ensuring it doesn't interfere with other equipment or is overly sensitive to electromagnetic interference. And finally, while the aim of the Radio Equipment Directive is to protect the radio spectrum. Conformity assessment is the sole responsibility of the manufacturer, and all manufacturers must have a conformity assessment procedure as part of the certification process. There are 4 categories of assessment procedures. These are modules A, B, C and H. In terms of the Low Voltage Directive, a manufacturer is allowed to self-certify their own product where the legislation provides for the product to undergo conformity assessment in accordance with Module A, that is internal production control. For more information, see Annex 3 of the Low Voltage Directive. There is no requirement to have your product certified by a notified body. In terms of the EMC Directive, Module A is referenced in Annex 2 of the EMC Directive, and this directive you must use a notified body when certifying products to which Modules B and C apply. And Module B is EU type examination, and Module C is conformity to type based on internal production control. For the Radio Equipment Directive, you must use a notified body when certifying products to which Modules A, which is in Annex 2 in the RED Directive, Module B, Annex 3, Module C, and Module H, which is conformity based on full quality assurance supply. Normally, if more than one directive or regulation applies to a product, it has to separately conform with the requirements of all applicable regulations or directives. You complete a single declaration of conformity, but list separately for each regulation or directive the standards used to demonstrate conformity and the details of the notified bodies used. However, the Radio Equipment Directive, it incorporates the requirement of both the Low Voltage and EMC directives. This means that for radio devices also covered by the EMC or Low Voltage Directive, you must have to produce one declaration of conformity, that for the Radio Equipment Directive. Here is a summary, as you can see here, of all conformity assessment procedures modules for the 3 directives. For the socket that has a USB connector, this must be certified to the EMC Directive. And for a socket that is a Wi-Fi extender, this must be certified by the Radio Equipment Directive. Here is a quick summary of Irish notifying authorities, accreditation bodies, notified bodies and market surveillance authorities for the directives referenced in this presentation. The Low Voltage Directive is different to the others, as products are certified by the manufacturer. This means there is no need for notified bodies, notification to the EU Commission or accreditation. However, INAB does accredit the test laboratories which manufacturers use when certifying their products. Market surveillance is carried out by the CCPC, the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. The Commission for Communications and Regulation, referenced to as ComReg, is the notifying authority and carries out market surveillance for both the RED and the EMC directive. INAB accredits notified bodies and test laboratories for both directives. There are 115 notified bodies for the EMC directive, 3 of which are found in Ireland: Compliance Engineering, SafeNet and Crenage Veritas, and 83 for the Radio Equipment Directive, 2 of which are in Ireland: Compliance Engineering and CTI SEM. Within the EU, there is a comprehensive regulatory framework for the safety and compliance of industrial products and for the proper functioning of the single market. Back in 2008, Regulation 765, listed here, was established as a legal basis for accreditation and market surveillance and consolidated the meaning of the CE mark. Decision 768 updated, harmonised and consolidated the various technical instruments already used in existing union harmonisation legislation. The Blue Guide is a comprehensive guide to the operation of the EU single market for manufactured products, and the latest version, 2016, builds on the content of the original guide first published in 2000. The new version of the guide includes new chapters, for example, on the obligations of economic operators, accreditation, completely revised chapters such as those on standardisation and market surveillance. It is available on the EU Commission website, and see the link here. Thank you for your attention. I hope I have simplified and demystified EU legislation for industrial products. If you require any additional information, please contact me, Mary White, at nsai.ie.